allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This would be the time set aside for public comment on any item that is not on the agenda tonight. Would anybody like to address the board on an item not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we will proceed to item number 4, where we are going to discuss actually a general market update and potential refunding opportunity, and we'll welcome Mr. Wenger. Mr. Wenger, good to see you this evening.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
2 pieces of paper. This is a quick introduction. You have a series of 2014 bonds.
Is that on?
Yeah, I was going to say, turn your mic on. The green light?
Sorry. You have a series of 2014 bonds that are not currently callable, and as a result of the, I guess it was 2018 tax code change, we can no longer advance refund tax-exempt bonds with tax-exempt proceeds. We can, however, advance refund tax-exempt bonds with taxable bonds. And given where interest rates are, an advance refunding of the 2014 tax-exempt bonds with taxable bonds would result in today's marketplace in savings of, where are my numbers? About 1.7 million present value, 2.5 million in gross over the life of the loan. Because most of this is sewer debt, we structure the savings evenly, just like you would refinance a home mortgage, so that you have the same effect to the sewer budget every year. Now, the offset to that is, if we waited till the call date, all other things being equal, namely interest rates are the same, as a hypothetical, the savings would increase to $6 million, and the annual savings would be in excess of $350,000 per year. So it's the age-old trade of, do I want to take what I can get today and not worry about where rates are in 4 years, or do I want to wait? Our general sense is, given the vast difference in savings, that waiting is probably the right thing to do, but it's our obligation to show you the opportunity and let you decide what you would like to do. The second page is just a rate graph, which is the very compelling argument to do something now. We are, again, near all-time lows in Treasury rates and tax-exempt rates. So somebody could make a very compelling argument that when rates are this low, you're supposed to take advantage. But because we would be issuing taxable bonds and the embedded cost of the escrow account from today until the call date, that's about a $4 million drag on the savings in theory. Again, I'm not here to tell you I know where rates are going to be at the call date, but that's the analysis.
Right. The call date is when?
The 5-minute limit.
Thank you. The call date is when?
The call date is 2024. I think it's April 1 of 2024, I believe it is. Okay. So we have almost 4 full years. That's a lot of time to have money invested at 1% while you're still paying off the. And the issuance of taxable bonds adds to the diseconomy, if you will, or lack of economy of scale in the refinancing transaction. The other thing to consider is once you flip to taxable bonds, you can't flip back. So the likelihood that you would refinance taxable bonds in the future is much, much lower than if you issue tax-exempt bonds at the call date. So that's the other consideration. If you do taxable debt today, I think realistically you have to view that as your last refunding of the 2014 bonds.
That would make sense.
Mm-hmm. Again, rates are very low, so I'm not trying to bias this. I guess I am, but I don't want you to be biased by my opinion. We are at all-time lows, so it's a very compelling argument if you want to proceed. Going from $2 million to $6 million is a big gap.
Yes.
Jay, I don't mind your biased opinion since you're the expert in the field.
Well, I would wait. I'm not a big fan of taxable advance refundings. I would wait.
And I understand that and appreciate that, but by the same token, you do this every day.
And you do. I mean, every month that goes by, the refunding gets a little more efficient, and as we get closer to the call date, 4 years is a long time for rates to go up and back down. So I think time is on your side. I think there will be another opportunity. And the backdrop for our opinion really is we just don't see inflation as a pressure point.
Right. Right now, the market's very strong, but you know, we don't know where it's going to go, but I think it's going to remain there. But that's my theory, and I'm not in the field every day. what are you seeing and reading in terms of future market and where it's going, the stability, if you will, or do we all have to wait till the elections are over?
Yeah, so I think near term, the election, I think, is an issue. The Fed tries not to be in the middle of rate changes in an election year. They just want to be viewed as apolitical as is possible. Longer term, I think people have now acknowledged that it's a global economy and the Fed can't just raise U.S. rates because they want to raise U.S. rates. It really is a global economy. And so their attempt to raise rates in 2018 and 2019 really was thwarted by the kind of lack of economic activity globally and very, very low interest rates globally, which is still the case. U.S. Treasury rates are still higher than a lot of sovereign debt rates around the globe. And so as long as that's the case, it's going to be very challenging for the Fed to raise rates. And so while the U.S. economy is, growing at a modest pace, it certainly isn't exceeding Fed targets. But there are very few economies other than China globally that are growing at a rate equal to or greater than the rate of growth in the United States.
So just as a follow-up, Jay, because of we as the United States competing in a world market, obviously we have had a small minor impact with China right now.
A little more
However,
small,
what
yeah.
are you seeing? Obviously, are you seeing anything? Is there anything coming out, at least for projections, as a result of that, in terms of a long-term impact on world economy?
Yeah, so it goes back some time. It was probably this time last year, but the growth expectations for all of the, quote unquote industrial countries around the globe, only 2 were forecasted to grow at a rate greater than 2.5% in 2020 and 2021. Those 2 were the United States and China. Every other country was less than 2%, some were less than 1%. Okay. So when you put all that together, the U.S. and China really carry the global economy, and this trade war is a fairly strong headwind. And, while they come out and announce that there's a deal and we're making progress, the trade war is not an easy resolution. There are a lot of very significant issues that are going to take a fair amount of time, if not a very long time, to resolve to our satisfaction. And I suspect, like most deals, it'll be some compromise between what we really want and what the Chinese really want. But there are some very significant issues that go beyond just tariffs. And so this is not going to be a short battle.
Right. Okay. Thank you, at least for your insight, what you have at this point, like the rest of us.
If you picked up 20 articles, I think at least 16 or 17 would say that.
Sure.
It seems to be a widely held opinion on the trade war.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other questions? Well, first of all, we appreciate your calling our attention
Yes.
to the possibilities, and I'm getting the sense that the consensus is that your recommendation to hold tight for now is where we want to go. I'm seeing everybody
Would
say
yield
yes.
to that?
Okay.
So we'll see how things go over the next year or 2.
Yeah, we'll keep you apprised. If the savings increase, we certainly will come back. If they decrease, there would be no reason to come back. But again, we have a lot of time until the call date, so
Yes.
I think patience will be rewarded.
And Jay, just based on your last comment, just a follow-up question. When do you think you need to come back and give us an update again? Is it a 6-month? Is it an 8-month? Is it a 3-month? Or do we wait for the circumstances to unfold with the trade agreements, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it's hard to see rates going lower than they are now, but who knows? I mean, we say that, we said that so many times in the past, and then rates go lower. But we have, we were within 4 or 5 basis points of the all-time low a week and a half ago, and then rates kind of popped up a little bit. So some days there's good news that rates pop a little bit. Some days there's bad news. I don't think the worst of the news in Europe yet, has played out. I think there's still probably more bad news, which would be a further drag on interest rates. But, if we see rates trending down and the savings start going up, we certainly will report back. I would think 6 months is probably a fair time frame.
I wouldn't want to limit to that, but Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend, since he monitors it every day, if he sees something that's of noteworthy, of importance to us, that he asks for a special meeting so that we might review whatever circumstances exist in the world and the impact that it would have on us directly.
I think you meet frequently. I don't think a special meeting. We keep Brad apprised of what's going on, so if the opinion starts to change and we think that you should move forward, we certainly would be back here.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Appreciate your time this evening, Jay. Now we are going to have a presentation on a memorandum on pedestrian safety Mr. Godshall, this having to do with Union Deposit Road?
That is correct, sir. Yes, Mr. Stump is here from HRG to briefly go over the memorandum. There are two of them actually, and just give us a brief explanation as to what their findings were there.
Again, Eric Stump with HRG. As Brad mentioned, there were two memos regarding potential or pedestrian safety along Union Deposit Road, specifically the portion immediately east of East Park Drive and Scenery Drive. PennDOT had a study done, an LTAP study that they had evaluated the area, and then Brad forwarded their study along to us and asked for kind of a third opinion on it. And essentially, the area that you're seeing here on the screen in particular, the LTAP evaluation suggested that a crosswalk could be placed at this location. It's an unsignalized intersection. As you see, it's a little bit offset, stop controlled on both Collingswood Drive as well as Michigan Drive. And again, they suggested potentially a crosswalk to be installed there. HRG took a look at that location as well, and kind of agreed that the guidance that's out there, PennDOT doesn't have great guidance for when it can or cannot be done. They give some rather generic guidance, but not anything concrete. What LTAP looked at, that we've looked at as well, is some guidance that Virginia DOT gives that is based on the roadway volume and speed and characteristics of the road, that recommends whether an unsignalized pedestrian crossing could be accommodated safely or not, and there's different criteria that provides. Based on that, that chart and the recommendation from Virginia that, again, LTAP was really relying on as well. It basically says a pedestrian crosswalk could be installed, but in order to do so, you should have some safety features added there. You can't just go out there, stripe a crosswalk, put in some curb ramps, and call it a day. There's some other features that would need to be added with it to make sure it operates safely. Specifically here, if you go maybe down to the very last page of this, illustrates what we were recommending if we pursue a crossing here, to convert that center left turn area into a pedestrian refuge to allow a pedestrian to cross one lane at a time and then get to the center area and then cross the other lane. Also, high visibility pavement markings, not just the two white lines on the edge, but the piano key style, if you will, just to improve visibility. Yield lines along the pavement, as well as signing to supplement that, just giving as much warning to the motorists as we can. This area might be a little bit unexpected for pedestrian traffic and motorists through there. Certainly aren't used to having a crossing there, but don't know. It's not like it's a downtown center where you have a ton of pedestrian activity, so it's a little unexpected. I think the better signing we can provide, advanced markings, the safer that crosswalk could operate. And then we didn't get into it too much in our memo, but really, you could consider doing this upgrade at the same time as upgrading the crosswalks down at Union Deposit and East Park to get the same sort of feel, the higher visibility, just to reinforce that this is a corridor where pedestrians are active, not just this isolated location. You could also potentially provide sidewalk on the south side of Union Deposit Road, again just reinforcing the pedestrian activity in that area. Now that's all. And the one thing I didn't mention, on either side of the crosswalk, we'd recommend street lighting as well, just for nighttime pedestrian activity. It's very dark through there at nighttime. So certainly wouldn't want to provide something that encourages pedestrians to cross without making sure they're visible all times of the day. So all of that is a rather big investment. You know, the crosswalk itself, plus potentially upgrades at Union Deposit Road, the sidewalk linking the two. You know, an alternative could be to you know, formally restrict pedestrian crossings, put some signs in. I know we already have that along Union Deposit on the other side of East Park, and you know, that they're not necessarily you know, the easiest thing to enforce or you know, all that meaningful to pedestrians. Pedestrians tend to walk where they want to walk.
Yes.
But you know, so really, you know, we're saying that this could be done, but certainly not saying this has to be done. I think you could restrict pedestrians, and then, you know, if you want to go that route, look for ways to try to deter that pedestrian, you know, crossing. Again, down on the other side of 83, it's a little bit easier, or I'm sorry, the other side of East Park Drive, it's a little bit easier to do that because you have a median. You can actually put something in the middle of that median, you know, some sort of split, you know, fencing or some other treatment in there to really make it difficult to cross. You don't have such luxuries here. It's a little bit more difficult to deter the pedestrian crossings.
Okay. Ready for questions?
Think so.
You ready for questions?
Yep.
I have a couple, if I may, please. Number one, are we allowed to do this because it's a state road?
It would all need to be permitted through PennDOT, my belief, but my expectation is that PennDOT would accept.
We would
the
have to
crosswalk.
submit for their approval.
Correct.
Correct. So they become responsible. Yes, no.
If they thought it was creating a safety issue, they wouldn't approve it.
Okay. But at this point in time, they're not willing to contribute any funds either.
I don't know. We haven't seeked funds from PennDOT, but
Okay. And then let's go through all the scenarios. Yes, we have permission. Yes, we pay for it. Yes, we're now responsible. No, they're not going to put any money into the project. Once that is implemented, as I know in at least in one other state, I think in two other states that I'm aware of, that if in fact you are a pedestrian and you step into that area, all traffic is required by law to stop. Is that applicable in Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania, once a pedestrian has established themselves in the crossing, then traffic must yield to them. It does not necessarily give the right for the pedestrian to step out in front of a car and force them to stop. Once they start crossing, motorists should yield to them at that point.
Okay, then I'll come back to my original question. Since it's PennDOT will require us, I mean, they'll have the final say whether we do it or not. What's a time frame from the time we say yes, let's submit our plan to PennDOT for approval?
From the time we get authorization, we'd go out there, we'd get survey because there's some curb ramp work, there's some street lighting. That would probably be a solid 2 to 3 months before we get survey-based mapping done and then get our design done into PennDOT. From that point, I'd expect another 3 months or so until we have PennDOT approval. So you're probably looking at 6 months from authorization before we're even thinking about going out to bid.
And at the same time, or do we have to do separately, ask them to help finance the expense of whatever this is going to cost? And I'm sure that at this point in time, we have no idea what that estimated cost will be. Am I correct?
For the crossing itself,
I asked you two questions. I'm sorry.
For the crossing itself, not the other stuff I was talking about, away from this location, but just the crossing, we're estimating about $80,000.
And that's with the center pad.
Correct.
Okay.
Does that include sidewalking on the south side?
Only a landing area,
Only a landing area.
but not extending the sidewalk.
I think the other stuff was around 80,000 too, or did that, like I was just adding up the items you had listed.
Yeah, that's where that 80,000 came from.
That's
the striping, the signing, the pedestrian refuge, the street lighting.
Well, here's my question. Why this particular location? Because the fatality that occurred was further east on the road, down in the sort of general vicinity of the school. How did we go from that being what prompted this discussion to the crossing being in this location?
Thank you. That was a question I had. Why the change of
I
location?
thought it was
Yeah.
I thought it was at Collingswood.
The LTAP study had studied this intersection. We kind of followed on that same.
But that isn't where the fatality occurred, about a mile further east?
There's been a couple, Loman. There was one up by the Giant, up by like coming
Right,
across at
yes.
Duncan.
One was up near the
And then-
drugstore, and then one was down closer to the school.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I thought the last one where the grandma was killed, I thought that was at Collingswood and Union Deposit.
Was it?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it doesn't matter pretty much where that will be located because we've had them at two ends. You have to choose a place and then hope people will cross at that location, which doesn't mean they necessarily will, but
Well, that's the
we've
other.
provided, you're right.
Eric,
And-
what is the criteria for an overhead catwalk and the pros and cons of doing it that way? Because I actually see this as it's almost a worst case situation. You know, there's how many people cross to begin with? I would say not that many, and cars are going to be going back and forth that are accustomed to going back and forth. So they're not accustomed to seeing people cross there anyway. So if you make it so that the person that's crossing thinks, well, I have the right of way, they're going to step out thinking the guy's going to stop, and he's not used to stopping because he's not used to seeing people cross there, and that makes it worse. What would happen if you put something overhead?
There's not necessarily criteria for doing that. Other than it's really a budget issue. You could certainly do that if the funding were there to do so.
I mean, is there criteria that has to be met to do that? I mean, you know how you do traffic
I'm
studies.
sure there's got to be
Sherman?
probably a volume of pedestrians or something.
Well, I guess that's the
Like a
other
traffic
question.
study.
Do we have any idea what the actual volume of pedestrian crossing per day would be in this general, within a mile of either side of where this could potentially go? I mean, are we talking 10 people who cross a day, 50, 100?
I don't even know how you would calculate that.
Well,
You'd have to have
that's-
somebody sitting there.
Other than,
20
yeah.
This is what we're talking about, though, and this isn't, obviously, this was not your charge on this. This was, you were asked to, look at a particular set of findings. But that's, as I was looking, and I'm trying to figure out, all right, A, where would we put it, and where would it have the greatest impact? And I realized we don't have any idea where people want to cross and where they're crossing, and so it's we're kind of doing it a little bit backwards. We don't know where the greatest risk is, the greatest risk for public safety. We don't know where. I don't know where.
Isn't that what the study was supposed to determine?
Well, I guess they identified the location first.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed type of scenario here. The geographic location was called out due to the incidents on both sides, this side and then further west on the road. But then, furthermore, when LTOP came in to do the study, they utilized Pannoni Engineering, and Pannoni went out to actually take a look at the corridor and analyze exactly that, the traffic, where people are crossing, how people are crossing. So they looked at it. I think, I don't know if HRG did the same when they looked at it or not, but I know Pannoni did do that as part of
They
their original
actually
study.
looked and tried get a feel for where the most of the people were crossing.
Correct, yes.
So obviously, like Robin said, that would probably take a lot of work because
You
I
would
don't know
have to
how
sit
you
there.
do
They
it.
were
yeah,
they
as
literally
opposed to
sat people out there, correct, doing the
Okay.
counts.
So
and-
that's
yes.
already been done, and that was part of the process of determining that this was the best location for a crosswalk. That was all part of the study.
that's
Is that what we're to take from this?
All that data was collected and made part of the study, right?
Part of the study, okay.
Right. I don't know that they were the determining factors as to where they actually placed them, but
I assume that what we were looking at was a model that was devised. It could be located anywhere along that corridor. For me, I think probably the most traffic is there where the drugstore is, with people crossing coming down over the hill from the development, crossing over, because that's the busiest intersection. That's where people would be walking over into the little shopping center or down the road.
So would it be better to improve the safety of the crossing at that intersection than it would be to put a whole new crosswalk in?
I would
If that's
feel
where
more-
people are going.
I would feel more comfortable doing that. Because if you're coming east and when that light turns green, people are going to floor it. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, there's a crosswalk and there's somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not that much room between the intersection and then you have the Sunoco and then right down there is Collingswood. I mean, people fly, once that red light turns green, they fly. And then all of a sudden they got to come.
Well, as I read,
Some-
I think as I read your stuff, unless it was the other one, there was a suggestion that the first option is usually to improve, to use the signalized intersections.
Correct.
That's the best.
Yes, yes.
And then, if you have to, you can do this.
Yeah, improving the signalized intersection seems to me to make the most sense because you're already stopping the traffic.
Right.
And drivers have a heightened sense of awareness because they're at a major intersection.
If that's where the people are.
That's where and that's where the people are.
If
Yeah.
that's where the
That's
walkers
majority,
are, I don't
in
know
my
that.
opinion, that's where the majority of people cross.
It might be better to improve that intersection and then, if necessary, add sidewalks along the south side to that intersection so people can walk along sidewalks to get to the intersection and then cross.
One of
Although that could be an expensive
and
undertaking
again,
as well.
a major issue, we talked about it, but again, it's out of our control, is the controlling of the signal lights.
Yeah.
If you're,
Wow.
is it Collingswood coming down to the traffic light? What's the street that comes right down there where the little home
I think it's
planning
Scenery.
place and you cross
Yeah,
over to
Scenery
CVS?
Drive
What
there.
street?
Drive.
Scenery.
Yeah, they're by the
Okay, when you
laundromat.
come down Scenery and you're trying to cross over, I don't know how many times you guys have done it.
Oh,
like
yes.
especially going to a Rotary meeting when it was over there. That light changes, and sometimes 2.5 cars
Yeah.
are eligible to go through on the light, but 5 cars literally go through the red light. I
yes.
think PennDOT needs to take a look at the traffic pattern and the light control at that corner. I think that should be our number one. I mean, that would help reduce any possibilities for accidents. And again, does it need to come as a formal request from us as a municipality to the state to say, you need to review the signaling system at that intersection?
I think another complicating factor is the fact that the lanes go from 2 to 1, just a little bit east of that intersection, and right before you get to where this crosswalk would be. So you have people who are
Merging right
maybe
there.
paying more attention to what's behind or beside them because they're merging than what's ahead. So now they've got to change their focus real quick before they hit where that
It's certainly another factor.
may not. I don't know. My whole view of it when I read this was that seems like an unlikely place to put it.
Can you put signs that say no pedestrian crossing?
You can, yep. And I think that in our memo, we kind of said you could either
Yeah.
Right.
restrict it altogether and tell them to use the crosswalk, go down to
Right.
Union Deposit
Right.
and East Park Scenery, or if you do want to enhance it, you got to really invest in it to make it safe.
And those, I'm sure, have a real low percentage of people following it if they
are-
recognize.
On the other side of East Park, down up closer to the interchange, there are a number of signs that say no pedestrian crossing. We were out there for maybe 45 minutes to an hour looking at the various things. While we were there, we saw 5 different groups of pedestrians cross there.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever the
In an
shortcut
hour,
is.
At that particular
frequent.
location,
Correct.
which is the busiest location not only for pedestrians but for automobiles as well.
I
And
actually-
then you can see there's some grass worn away and some
Yeah.
some tracks where you can tell a lot of people are crossing right there and walking down towards into this giant shopping center.
I actually saw one in a motorized scooter cross
Oh yeah,
right down there across
seen it
all
before.
4 or 5 lanes.
And one of the things alone at that intersection it would help because if you're coming off the expressway headed east and you get to the far lane because people want to make a left-hand turn right there to go up the hill, even that where that little the cement part, if using your model with the piece in the center, if people were to cross, it's a good place for that. Because it would be a larger area for people to stand in a safe manner before they would have to do the other half of that street.
right.
Can
And
we?
thing with that sort of treatment there in a center turn lane, just want to be careful you're not putting it somewhere where it's going to be, want to be used as a left turn
Right.
pocket. Whereas here, the way the intersections are kind of misaligned, it actually helps that's not an area used for left turning vehicles off
Becomes
Union
a,
Deposit.
becomes a calming device, if you will.
Well, there's that.
Yeah, and now certainly turning off the side streets onto Union Deposit, that could be an issue too with those getting hit or the signs on there maybe getting knocked. They gotta make sure the island's visible as well. It's relatively small, so.
So, Brad, can we maybe go back a little bit to the drawing board and look at what potential improvements we could make at the East Park Drive intersection, and examine the cost of doing something there and putting up no pedestrian crossing signs in this area, which may discourage at least a few people from doing it. Obviously, folks are going to do what they want to do, but it would be good for us to maybe see what would be involved in doing that as an option.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, could we also initiate a letter to PennDOT indicating that we're doing this and that we're reviewing, and we would like their cooperation and their money to help us implement a safety tool to be implemented for the safety of all residents?
Well, till we know what
They're gonna ask
project
the
we want
cost.
to do and what the cost is.
Maybe we wait.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, Brad, we have, it's not here, but we have somewhere the numbers of pedestrians and generally where they're crossing or
I believe we have a general sense. I mean, like I said, Pannoni did do the site visit, and they spent multiple days looking at it, reviewing pedestrian travel patterns. I don't know that they collected necessary scientific data on that, but they did, I know, speak to pedestrians who were, walking back and forth. So they have personal accounts of those things. They viewed the pedestrian travel for a number of days. So, again, they have a professional sense of it. I don't know that they have scientific data to back that up. But
it seems like that's where we have to start from, right? Instead of just guessing out of the blue, we need to know, and I know that's labor intensive, we need to know where the people are crossing if we want to know either A, to put in a pedestrian, or B, how do we funnel them down to the signalized.
I think that's a part of the problem. I through the conversations that the engineer Pannoni had with people actually in that area, walking to various stores and things. I also took a personal phone call from a reporter who was doing the same thing, interviewing people on the scene, and what people were telling the engineer and the staff reporter were that they know that there's a crosswalk established at a traffic signal, a signalized intersection, but they're not walking the extra 200 feet to do it. They're going to do it wherever they feel it's most comfortable and convenient for them to do so.
We may have to do both.
Well, I think that's why the engineers put forward the suggestion they did, just based on what would make it the safest to get people where they are seeing people cross mostly across to the other side in connection to what PennDOT would allow them to do. So I think there are multiple factors at play in this, not just determining where people are crossing most, but a number of things. So
what they're likely, worst thing we want to do is spend a lot of money, paint a lot of stripes, and then really nobody uses it. That would be the worst.
They're going to cross where they want to
Exactly.
cross. They don't care if there's a crosswalk or not. They're going to cross. And unfortunately, Pannoni probably did this during the day. Both of the deaths have occurred at nighttime, like after 9:30 in the
But
dark.
people are generally going to probably have the same routes, whether it's during the day or at night. It's more dangerous at night. But there's only X amount of places you're going to, and hopefully we do this in a way that, to the best of our ability, we want to figure out where they're going, where they want to go, what route do they want to take, and then what are our options.
I had also asked HRG the possibility of installing, certain pedestrian prohibiting devices like you see in downtown Hershey.
Right.
They look nice and they do a particular job, which is to stop pedestrians from traveling back and forth. But they, in the engineer's opinion, that there's a real issue at this particular area due to the fact that you have the cross turning travel. You have the traffic turning lanes in the center, and that would, really bottle things up and have lead-on consequences. But they did explore those options as well.
Okay, well, why don't we examine further improvements at the East Park Drive intersection, and we can then review that in conjunction with this and bring that back to another workshop and see where we want to go.
LTAP had done another evaluation on the other side of East Park Drive. We were looking at that. We can incorporate improvements at that intersection into that same memo and then maybe come back.
Great.
Good.
That sounds good.
Great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we now have first presentation of a resolution, this being Resolution 2020-07, establishing the procedure and authorization for the disposal of unnecessary personal property. Mr. Godshall.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this resolution, the board had seen a resolution much like this back a number of years ago and adopted such resolution, at that time allowing the township to dispose of personal property to first our 3 volunteer fire companies. The second class township code allows boards of supervisors to, from time to time, establish procedures that would allow us to dispose of personal property through that set procedure rather than going through the other procedure allowable to us, which is to put the items on a public auction or make a request for bids. That all takes time and board action every time you want to sell something. So in taking a look at how to do this the best way, this draft ordinance would essentially allow us, per the second class township code, to have the board establish a procedure to allow us to sell these items whenever they are accumulated and whenever we have established that the fair market value of those items is $2,000 or less, which is what the code requires.
Now, that gives you maximum flexibility. Brad, there is a third one too. Historically, COG has run one annually for all the municipalities to bring other things together and have a much larger auction. We used to do that in the school district. We would combine several school districts would go together because that would meet the law requirements and dispose of it. This one, depending on how it's written, obviously would give us maximum flexibility to dispose of that whenever, as opposed to once a year on a given date, time, and place. So that way you don't have to store all that stuff. So, yeah, if it can be written properly, I think it's to our advantage to do so.
Any other questions
And
or
what
comment?
it says personal property, just to be clear, it's equipment, vehicles, stuff that goes with a fire.
Correct. I believe the
company.
procurement code or some code out there has the definition of personal property as, yes, vehicles and
But it's more than
things
fire
other than
and
real
police.
estate. Correct.
It's more than fire and police. It
It
could
would
be
be
like
for the-
it could be like desks in the office.
Correct.
It
The
could
whole
be
town-
file cabinet. It
yeah,
could be
the whole
anything within your owned by the municipal government
Right.
Not the manager's wristwatch or
Yeah.
any personal property like
or township managers.
or the town. No, we're not going to auction off the township manager.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Brad, when do you anticipate that we'll see a draft of this?
Well, in front of the board tonight is the draft. I did have one question for the board. The previous resolution that is in effect today, Resolution 15-18, has, under the procedures for disposing of property to fire companies, a provision in it which essentially allows the township to offer those items at a 40% reduction from the fair market value. At the time, the board had established that as being a something they wanted to provide to the fire companies. So my question for the board is, we do have something in the draft resolution tonight, which gives the volunteer fire companies the first, attempt at purchasing the items. But does the board want in this resolution to, allow the fire companies to have a 40% reduction in that cost?
I don't have any problem with that.
The fire companies, but not
The fire companies.
not any private entity that might.
Correct.
And Brad, maybe the question is you or to Steve, does it need to specify, or is it because it's silent, that means we can do it whenever we want to do it? I don't know who to address the question to.
Well, obviously it's going to be at Brad's discretion when he wants to sell things. But with regard to the lower rate, as far as 40% of what of reduction in the value, you can do that because you can give things to volunteer fire companies. You don't even have to sell it to them.
That wasn't my question.
Okay, well, what?
My question is, because it's silent, may we do it at any time, as opposed to in some regs they have to be done at a certain time, once a year. They're restricted to once a year, twice a year, or whatever.
You mean the sale of items?
Yes, and because it's silent here, that gives us flexibility to do it
I think this
whenever.
contemplates any time.
That's fine. That's exactly what I'm hoping for.
Brad, how do you dispose of this? You have like a yard sale? How do you
Yes, Brad's yard sale.
do it? What's the logistics involved?
Yeah, so this
advertise.
resolution would not preclude us from entering, like a Municipid. We have an online system for municipalities. Municipid, it's called. It's like eBay for municipalities. It does not preclude us from using something like that or going to an auction, but it just gives us an extra option where, if it's determined that the fair market value is $2,000 or less, we can do private sales. If somebody comes to us and says, a car dealership comes to us and says, we'll offer you, $1,400 or whatever for this vehicle, we can do that per this procedure once the fair market value is established.
Okay, very good.
I think it's covered because
So we don't need to take any action. This is only a first presentation.
I think we're covered.
Correct.
Okay, well, with that, then we also have first presentation of Resolution 2020-09. This involving a streetlight services agreement providing for the furnishing of electric streetlight service to the Township of Lower Paxton. What do we wish to do there, Mr. Gottschall?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So essentially right now, PPL owns all of Lower Paxton streetlights. We merely rent from them those facilities. We have approximately 445 high-pressure sodium lighting units throughout the township. And PPL has a program that they will convert those lights to LED upon our request. So I've been working with PPL for a number of months to, determine how we go about this. And what is in front of the board this evening is that mechanism. The board has to pass a resolution to allow us to do it, to actually allow us to sign an agreement to do this. And what will occur after this is signed is all 445 lights will be converted to LED. The caveat to this is that any light that is 10 years or newer, so it's been installed in the past 10 years, we have to pay to have that converted. PPL won't do that free of charge. So the cost to converting those 113 lighting units would come at an approximate cost of $1,225. The remainder of them will be free conversion to the township. And then once completed, the PPL invoice will actually reduce by about $650 a month, or about $7,800 annually. So that $1,200 investment will be quickly recouped.
That appears to be a no-brainer.
Yes.
And Brad, if the lights go out, we're responsible to replace them, right?
Oh, PPL will replace them.
They'll replace the lights?
Somebody has to
Okay.
just contact them and let them know. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like a no-brainer. So, any questions, comments?
So nothing else in the relationship changes.
we'll get a new contract. That's about it. But the payment of the contract, nothing will change. Just a new physical document.
Has there been any discussion on the difference between lumens, between what's there and what's coming, so that people get the new LED and then they're complaining that the light's shining in their bedroom windows and stuff like that?
I did inquire about that to PennDOT because I do know that is a controversy when these conversions take place. There will be some lights that are shining on people, but PennDOT mentioned that they can just come in and adjust it. Yep.
Yeah, adjust it.
They are much better. I have one that I pay for on the street in front of my house, and about 2 years ago we converted it over to LED. Much better light. You know, it is brighter, but the purpose of having the street light is that you want light. So I thought it was a tremendous upgrade whenever they put that bulb in.
And Major, it's cost saving. So, and I've had this in another situation where people complain, or neighbors, all of a sudden their light's coming in. Yes, but it is a cost saving, and government is pushing for us to save money for our taxpayers.
Somehow my PPL bill didn't go down when they put that bulb in, though. Interesting.
Chris, maybe you could check with the Heatherfield representative, if you happen to know who that is, to find out, does PP&L own the street lights in the development?
Oh, probably.
So they'll be converted?
Could be. I'll have to check.
There you go.
Do you have a homework assignment?
Yes. All right. Anything else on this issue? Okay, we are now at the point where there are announcements. Any members of the board or the manager have any announcements they would like to make? Hearing none, there being no further business before the board, our next board meeting, a business meeting, will be 1 week from tonight, Tuesday, February 18th, 2020 at 7:00 p.m. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye? Aye. Meeting adjourned.
I said it.
I didn't hear you.
Yeah, well. Yeah.
No.
The two lanes version